book, were there places that you found that really still need preservation? Are there some that are truly endangered? Six
Yeah,
Flags or
there,
whatever?
there are, there are always pieces. Thank goodness we got past the Walmart thing at the Wilderness, and that's being moved. A decision that seemed like an easy one to get to, but it took 3 years for some reason. There are pieces of every battlefield, but the one thing that sticks in my mind, that just about every time I see it, it just gets to me a little bit, is in Fredericksburg, actually. The Fredericksburg that most people know is the battle that happened in the town. Burnside throwing troops against that stone wall, and thousands left on that hillside. But of course the main battle was supposed to happen south of the town. Pelham's Corner, where John Pelham set up one gun and brought one crew down and basically stalled the Union Army's advance for over 45 minutes, all by himself, defying Jeb Stuart's orders to come back to the line. And no matter what you think of the South's cause, what he did was absolutely courageous and heroic. And if you go there today, there is a stone marker there, there's a cannon, and there's a little mini mall called Pelham's Corner. And every time I see that, I get a little bit angrier. So, that's one thing I think about the Eastern Theater. There always seem to be chunks missing, and there's always a hope that someday we'll get some of the rest of those back, but it's going to take time.
We've had a couple of emails in. One of them from Ed, who saw you at the forum and got your book there from us, actually, and is going to see you again and ask about his ancestor's diary, George Dixon. So he's going to talk to you about that when he sees you next. But Doug from Centralia asked, what role do you feel Lincoln's order to execute John Beale played in Booth's decision to assassinate the president?
I don't even mention that in my book. Booth regarded Lincoln, he hated him with a fury. He blamed him for all the suffering and misery in the South. He called him a tyrant. He wanted him removed by any means, including murder. And he thought of himself as the instrument of God who would carry this out. I don't think other extraneous things like that had anything to do with it. Honestly, I don't, my personal opinion. Booth was a fanatic, obsessed, like all fanatics, with one thing, couldn't see the wood for the trees. If he could bring down the top leadership of the federal government, the Union would collapse and the Confederacy would rise again. It was as simple as that in my mind. This was a man who was so self-assured, cocksure of himself, and the fact that he was so good-looking and had such a bewitching spell on so many people of both genders. I mean, Lewis Payne was bewitched by this fellow.
It was like Tom Hanks murdering the president in a way.
Yes.
It was well known.
Yes. So I don't honestly think it had anything to do with it. I think Booth was just fixated on that.
He certainly felt he was a tyrant.
Yes.
And my feeling also is that playing tyrants or playing against tyrants, like in Pescara, where on the stage,
Yes.
Booth had this feeling about tyranny,
Yes.
and it was an emotional thought to him, and I think that helped propel him.
Yes, being so into Shakespeare, Richard III and all these evil men, yes, his whole blood, his whole makeup was suffused with this. So he saw himself as the chief instrument of carrying us out.
One point, there's so many different points that we could talk about for a couple of hours about this assassination, for instance. You feel that he broke his leg when he leapt from the box onto the stage, or as some people think, because he was found later, all this mud on his leg, on his trousers, that it was a horse falling, and that's where he broke his leg, trying to escape.
Okay, that again is speculation about when he did it, except best evidence is the written evidence. Best evidence is one of the rules of law. the best evidence here is Booth himself. He recorded in that calendar that he used as a diary, he broke his leg when he fell. And
That's
Mike,
in the book.
and Mike Kaufman, who is an extremely knowledgeable man on the assassination, his book is brilliant. I said that it was Pulitzer material. He puts forward the idea that Booth broke it in the horse fall. I answered that in a footnote. A man with a broken leg can do things under the adrenaline of the moment, and I elaborate on that. You get war wounded who are shredded to bits, and they do the most courageous things when their bodies have been shattered, because they're moving under the adrenaline, and that's what Booth did. This was the moment he lived for.
You know,
That's
talking about the diary,
that's why he could run off the stage
the
with a broken
diary
leg.
out there that you speak about so much here. You know, he would speak about his death, of course, and it's in great detail, and it really puts one there. And it shows how he knew he was dying, and they were picking his pockets while he was dying. He saw all that. Now, did he get his wish to live in history? But, you know, man proposes, God disposes, and it's not the way he wished. Did he start to get an inkling of that in the woods as he was getting
Oh, yes.
newspapers of what really people thought
Oh
of?
yes, he wanted three things on the run: food, something to drink, and newspapers to appreciate how he'd been accepted as a glorious hero. He was horrified to realize that even the Southerners were turning against him. He said, I expected to be treated like a hero and I'm hounded like a dog. It was the Southerners who said, we have lost our best friend. And so he not only was conscious, as the Surgeon General said, of this excruciating pain in his last moments, and I like that he felt pain, but he also knew that the people he thought he was doing it for, even they rose up against him. So he died really disillusioned.
Michael, I have so much here, and here we are getting close to the end, and we're just beginning as far as I'm concerned. Briefly, how would you implement the presentation of Civil War battlefields if you were the head of NPS? What changes might you make to present a battlefield to the public?
What a great question.
Yeah, that was on mine.
The National Park Service does a great job. I think that the folks that they have right now in most of these places are doing phenomenal things. I think that, as we discussed before, we talked about the apps and things, I think bringing technology into it, as long as it's not intrusive, is a fantastic thing. Here in Illinois, there was a little controversy, especially when it opened, about the Lincoln Museum, and how it was sort of Disneyfied and that sort of thing. But I have to say, if I was a kid, I'd have a whole heck of a lot better time there than I would, walking the field if I was just looking at a bunch of stone monuments and cannons and that sort of thing. It's necessary to get the hook. So I think the more you can bring technology into it and make it easier to understand, without necessarily understanding, where the first Minnesota was and why they did this and this, but just knowing what they did at Gettysburg, and getting some sense of what that was like. I think that's a lot more important than reading all of the stone markers and the iron plaques and a lot more fun.
Technology could be placed onto the battlefield as well, though.
Absolutely, yeah.
That could, you put your finger on something and it's going to open up and maybe tell you what's going on right there and show you. Can you have
Sure,
that too?
and they've had degrees of that in the past where you'd push a button and hear a little squawk box, half a minute talk on something. But the way things are going now, I could see using things like holograms and sort of heads up things like that. I don't know what the progress is, but I don't think they're that far away.
A friend of mine sent me this letter, and I have to show it because I also want to. Here is a letter written October 21st, 1865, from Fort Jefferson to Dry Tortugas by Samuel Mudd. And it's fascinating what he says in here. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is that He says, "No man can say naught against conduct of either of us up to the present, other than my individual effort to get away." And he's very upset about being guarded by the Negro soldier. And that is what he says is why he tried to actually try to get away. But he thought that there was also, one of the reasons he and the others, he says here, we four and another prisoner under life sentence have been locked in a room every night, closely guarded, and not allowed to leave the door during the day without being accompanied by a guard. This is said to be owing to a rumor or information which the government is in possession of, that a plot or plan originating in Havana or New Orleans to rescue us from this place. So they were put into that because they were afraid of being rescued from the Union. He says, though, later in the letter, that he feels it was a plot just to make it harder on them while they were serving their sentences.
Well,
Were there those
the
things happening?
authorities were brutal.
Was it a plot to do that? I
I
think
think
there were people trying to go out to make it as brutal as possible.
Oh, yes. Oh, they were brutal. They tortured them. They had one fellow, he was sick, and he asked to be off work, and they said no. And what they did, they tied his hands behind his back and his legs. They threw him in the sea. And when he bobbed up again, they pushed him down. And they did that several times, and then they sent him out to work. Another one, they hung him by his thumbs throughout the night, dangling from a window. They were brutal, and when he refers to being humiliated by, being guarded by Negroes, as he says, he was an out-and-out believer in white supremacy. And he writes in many of his letters, which I got hold of, that he regards this as the ultimate humiliation to be guarded by Negroes. So
Many of them did, even in Point
Yes.
Lookout, Maryland. I once had some sketches that were like cartoons, and
Yes.
the sketch artist was so upset about it and showed some humiliations by the Negroes.
That's
Yes,
right. That's right. But Mudd redeemed himself. He
Yes, he did.
performed brilliantly with stepping into the shoes of when the surgeon died and they had a yellow fever outbreak. That was why he was pardoned in 1869, the principal reason.
and the rest of them let go too.
Yes.
I'm going to put you to work here, beginning to sign some of the books that we have for you that were ordered already. And I'm going to thank some of the people kind of quickly. We don't have a lot of time. Two from Canada, Jim in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and Marianne in Burlington, Ontario, Canada, Jerry in Rochester, New York, Garrett in Palmdale, California, Harold in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, Pat in Burlington, Iowa, Teresa in Galloway, Ohio, Les in Flossmoor, thank you, Les, the Raider family in San Antonio, Texas, Charles, we just saw you, we appreciate that, Charles in Chicago, Doug in Louisville, Robert in Richmond, Stuart in Littleton, New Hampshire, Jim in Brown Deer, the Smith family in Longwood, Florida. We thank you and others very much for helping to support our endeavors here. Upcoming virtual book signing events, you'll watch our website, virtualbooksigning.net, and if you have not, if you're watching for the first time and have not given us your email so you get updates, please do that. Friday, September 30th, will be David Blight with his American Oracle, and in the fall we'll also have Elizabeth Leonard on Joseph Holt. That'll be, we'll go back to the assassination, and Gail Steffens on Lew Wallace, who also was there. We'll have Brooke Simpson representing a book written by Albert Castell, Victors in Blue, as well, all coming in the fall. There's so much in these books that we did not get to, and you're going to have to go in there to do some of that. For instance, Weichmann's testimony about Madame Surratt saying that rejoicing will be turned into sadness. Well, that was a wonderful little quote to come out with. Andrew Johnson, of course, said she kept the nest within which the rotten egg was hatched. Maybe this Weichmann quote was enough to hang her. You'll see and hear. You, Anthony, really vividly described what Washington was like prior to the assassination. We didn't get to it here, but you'll read about it, what the atmosphere in the city was. as it pertained to the assassination and the lead up to it. So you have to read the book to get that. It's beautifully written. You're also going to find that Mary Lincoln purchased some mourning clothes 1 month before the murder. I was going to ask if she was a conspirator, knowing that this was going to come up. But maybe she just got this from a seance. And I was going to ask some questions of you, Michael, as well, about some of the battlefield experiences which you thought were some of the most interesting. And the 7 days are a wonderful one to go through. You did that beautifully and really took us right through it. So thank you both for being here. We didn't get a chance for everything, but I think it was an interesting discussion for everyone. And I want to thank all of you who are watching now and you on the archives as well. Thank you for coming back and watching. Those of us who have been here, 2 of them left to go to a Hemingway birthday party. This is his birth today. And I want to thank the staff at the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, not only for putting this on, but for also getting some questions for me to have out here. This was a conglomeration of all of us. Do come back again. We hope to see you here. Thank you very much for joining us. This was great fun. I enjoyed this. There's so much more.